Wow, look at this. This isn't something we get to see very often. Giraffes lying down. And this may be, for a lot of you, the first time you've ever seen them doing this. So a great start to this live safari here in Djuma Private Game Reserve. You can see that individual that Brian's just zoomed into now is chewing on something, and oh, morning, time to get up. Now, I wonder, have they seen something? The other two are looking in the opposite direction that Brian showed you. Maybe it's just that time of the morning to wake up. As I was saying though, the one female was chewing the cud, and these are the same 5 giraffe, I'm guessing, that we saw yesterday on the Sunset Safari. So some of you may have been with us to enjoy them then. Let's creep forward and have a look at what may have spooked them. It could have just been a false alarm. My name is Scott. It's a great pleasure to have you on board with me, and I'm teamed up with Brian Joubert on camera. On the other vehicle, James Henry and David have headed out, and Kirsty is directing the show with Leanne, Nikki and Louise all in there giving her a hand. Now, I'm not going to shine the spotlights on them, we're just going to rely on some silhouettes. I'm going to try and work out what's what. Doesn't appear to be any immediate danger here. Cat, very happy that you can confirm that this was your first sighting of giraffe lying down, and 4 out of the 5 of them. And not only that, but we also got to see how quickly they can get up if they need to. And not only cats, a lot more of you have also just shared a first-time experience with us, and that is the beauty of being on Safari Live. There are so many different things we can experience out here. Even though it may be with the same species, there are so many variables in terms of sightings you may have with any given species. So, like I said, a great start. If any of you do not know how to get a hold of us like Kat just did, it's very simple. You can send us a tweet using the hashtag SafariLive, or you can email questions@WildEarthTV. As you can see, it's a cloudy day out to the west. That's the direction they are moving in. But also to the north, south, and east. It's 8/8 cloud cover here in the Sabi Sands. Hopefully it will bring some rain to this drought-stricken landscape, but there's no guarantees that will happen. At least though it will be keeping us and the animals cool, so it's more likely that we will see them active and enjoying the cool weather. It also means for the vegetation that there will be less evapotranspiration, less moisture will be sucked out of the earth and the leaves by the baking sun, so that's also good prospects for the plants as well. Donovan, I was wondering and waiting for one of you to ask what exactly the lights out to the north and kind of west are. There they are there. They're not as easy to see as it was in the beginning of the drive, and it was a bit darker. I think that is possibly coming from a major town an hour and a half away from us called Hoedspruit, but I could be wrong. But that is far outside of the reserve. I've never been able to pinpoint for certain where those big bright lights are coming from. It could be villages outside the reserve, or it could be as far as Hoedspruit, which, even though it may be an hour and a half's drive, it's not that far as the crow flies. A lot of that journey will be covered along bumpy dirt roads, and that's what takes us so long. VM did the trip yesterday to take Sam back to town, to fly back to his home in Cape Town. Hello to TB on YouTube, and you would like to know if any people in the world eat giraffe. Yes, they do. Not very commonly though, and even in the the venison trade, the wild meat trade, which is legal in South Africa. Just depends on where you acquire the wild meat from. But yes, the venison or wild meat trade in South Africa is a big one. But you don't commonly get giraffe on the menu. More common things are kind of kudu, impala, your regular antelope, so to speak. But you can definitely feed on giraffe. And one thing that I would like to say further on this topic, TB, is that most animals in Africa will be eaten. Just about everything that moves will be fed on by certain people within certain tribes. There will be varying degrees of demand for various meats, but like I say, just about every animal will be fed on. And that's the interesting thing. A lot of the local people use local medicines, traditional medicines, and the doctors that practice this medicine will often use wild animals as to form part of their potions and concoctions, or various parts of animals. I know vultures are highly sought after for the medicine trade, which is a big reason why their numbers are in decline. So the answer is yes on many different levels. I've never eaten giraffe though, but I have eaten many other wild game. And in a country like South Africa, there's a lot of parks where the vegetation remains natural. So it's as it was hundreds of years ago, all besides the fact that there are no predators, and therefore the antelope's numbers will grow dramatically every year, or drastically every year, and they need to be brought down so as to not overfeed or overstress their habitat. So culling essentially is needed to be done, and what that means is that there's a surplus of wild game meat that can be fed on by us. So not every wilderness area in South Africa does have the dangerous carnivores, and I guess therefore humans step in to keep the ecosystem in check. Now a lot of you are discussing the new male leopard we got to see last night. Wasn't that exciting stuff? I haven't yet been able to confirm exactly who he is. I know a lot of you have got reason to believe that he is a male from the north, the northern property from us, our northern neighbors, Buffelshoek, and it's even believed that he may have been seen mating with Karula, as well as I think another female on Torchwood. Either way, it's exciting stuff. He's got a very distinctive notch on his kind of right ear. Not really a notch, it's just missing the top little section of his ear. And it'll be wonderful to get to see him more. Hopefully he does become more relaxed. And for those of you who did not know about that, there is a video up on the Safari Live Facebook page of the brief sighting we had of him yesterday. It was really, really exciting stuff. And again, well done to VM for spotting it. Cool. Well, we are actually going to be heading onto our northern boundary now and heading all the way east towards where that leopard was seen last night. So it is possible we may find him. In the meantime, though, we are going to send you across to Mr. Henry for an update on his plans for the morning.
Greetings, morning greetings here from Rusty. That is this vehicle, in case you were wondering what on earth Rusty is. My name is James Henry. On camera today we've got David. Hello, David. Very nice buff this morning. Navy blue, wonderful. And you are, as Scott told you, on a live safari, and our little idea today was to come down the centre of the property and see if we couldn't find sign of the Ngahuma pride, who seem to have disappeared from the earth, really. They came into the reserve about 2 days ago, and then tracks were covered up by rain. We don't know where they are. We have absolutely no idea. They could be around any corner here. So that's part of the joy of being out here, of course, is that we just don't know what's going to happen, especially after a little bit of rain. So that's the story this morning. Remember, we'd love to hear from you. Hashtag Safari Live, questions at WildEarth.TV. And if you want to talk to us about Africa in general, or travel to Africa, or travel to South Africa, we have had lots of good discussion about that, and especially we've helped, I think, to dispel some of the myths and Well, some legends about Africa that perhaps aren't true and are stopping people coming to visit us here. So please, if you have any questions like that, feel free to send them through. I want you to listen quite carefully. It's a cold morning. It's probably about 22 degrees Celsius or 71 degrees Fahrenheit. And there are some cicadas calling. That's a very summer sound, and I haven't heard them calling for the last little while, and I'm sure it's a function of the fact that we've had some rain, and somehow, somewhere, I don't know if they're new ones that have just come out of the ground, because that's where they live, of course. But it's interesting, and I think it's going to be quite hot during the course of the next week, and it'll be interesting to see how many insects come out. There have been lots of insects, most of them seemingly in my bed, actually, and I think the rain is going to create an enormous explosion of insects around the place, which will be interesting, and hopefully, too, some froggies. On we go, David. On we go. It's quite dark this morning, and I'm sure that's because the cloud is thick. Hello, Dylan. Good morning to you. Well, good evening to you. You're in Iowa, and you want to know what time it is that guests go out in the morning normally at the lodges. Well, interestingly, the guests at WildEarthTV camp just next to where we live. That's the Djuma camp. I have not gone out yet. I have not heard their ranger calling in on the radio. So I guess the answer would be probably around 6 o'clock. 5:30, we're starting to get a little bit early because there's no light. So I think mostly at Londolozi and Singita and Malamara and the other lodges around here, Arathusa, guests will be meeting on deck at 5:30 for tea, and then they'll go out after that. So probably around 5:45, 6 o'clock they'll be going out. We try and vary it with the sun, though, and with the changing light of the dawn. It's not a great idea to go out when it's too dark in the morning. You tend to drive over tracks, and that's not a great idea. And it's just a little bit more difficult to see things when it's dark, obviously. So, Dylan, by the middle of the winter, you'll find that guests are going out probably an hour later than they are now, 6:45. And then and then in the afternoon the times change as well, of course. So in the middle of summer you want to go out probably around, actually ideally around 4:30 to 5 o'clock. So you've got sort of 3 hours of daylight and then half an hour or so of darkness, and it's obviously very hot in the summertime. And then in winter, in the afternoons, well, you can actually go out if you're staying at a lodge. I think it's quite nice to spend the whole day out and skip the sort of evening safari because it's very cold and you tend to see very little unless it's very late at night. So it's quite a nice idea if you're on safari to actually spend the whole day out and skip the evening. Otherwise, to go out around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and be back just after sundown before the cold sets in. Thank you, Dylan. I hope you come and visit us someday. We are now on the southern boundary. Scott is on the northern boundary, and we'll head east in the same direction that Scott is going. Hello, Debbie. Let's have a look here to answer your question. If you wouldn't mind just panning over the grassland here, please, David. Debbie, you want to know if there's been a flush of green since the rain we've had. It's not as obvious as it might seem from that shot, but yes, it has flushed. And Dave, if we come, let me just sneak a little bit forward. If you look over here, Debbie, this is where you can start to see the grass. If you get it up close and personal with some of these browning grass plants, you can see little flushes of leaves, and those are the green leaves of the grass. And you can see already most of them have been grazed. A lot of them the animals have had a go at. As soon as they flushed, the grazers in desperation have attacked them with relish. There we go. So although the entire sort of landscape hasn't been blanketed in green, there is Absolutely. If you go to the bottom of each individual grass plant, certainly there are leaves coming out of all of them, and that will be a great relief for the grazers. That won't last for very long if we don't get a bit more rain. Like I say, we have had over the last 48 hours about an inch in total. Maybe an inch and a little bit, inch and a quarter. Hello, Luciferia. You're a relatively new viewer, and you are very kindly concerned as to what we do when the rains fall, if the rains fall, we should say. Do we pull over? Do we put a cover on? It really depends on how bad the rain is. We do have a canvas rain cover that we can put over the very sensitive electronic equipment at the back here, and then David sits sort of half on and underneath it, and it's very amusing to watch if you happen to be sitting where I am. And then we'll carry on driving for a while, but if it really gets to be a heavy downpour, we'll run for cover. We'll go back to home and sit underneath the cover. And remember though, the rain here doesn't last normally more than an hour or so, and so very seldom do we have to actually abandon a drive. So yesterday morning, for example, there was some very pleasant rain just at the beginning of drive, and the Scott and Sam went back in for about half an hour or so and then went back out. So that's generally how it happens in Luciferia. But the Land Rover, it's interesting, is designed in such a way, it's an amazing thing. It's one of the quirks. The Land Rover, of course, is the most quirky vehicle you can buy, short of buying say a Model T Ford, or indeed the original vehicle ever designed. But if you look at the steering wheel here, if you're driving along in the rain, what you find is that the steering wheel forms a perfect funnel of water that will be deposited directly into the middle of your lap. And so as soon as it starts to rain, you get a wet undercarriage immediately.
Just ahead, Brian, it's ahead of us. Okay, everyone, there is a honey badger. We just need to try and catch up to it. Hold on tight. Where to stop? Where to stop? I've got a plan. Hold on. Brian, just stay on the left. If you keep the camera on the left, there will be good. Okay, hold tight, everyone. It was just moving too quick for us, but we're going to be able to loop ahead slightly here, and I'm sure we'll be able to get you some good views of it. Just hold on. Should be coming straight towards us now. Please keep coming towards us. Please keep coming towards us, honey badger. You may have got a glimpse of it. It was just moving too quick, so I've taken a major gamble here. I'm hoping it is going to pay off. We've just looped ahead. It was heading directly towards where we are now. Well spotted, Brian. Oh no. Come on. Please keep coming. Oh no, I think I may have made the wrong decision there, everyone. Apologies, but I really thought I was doing the right thing. You may have just seen a brief black and white glimpse of what is an animal that we see so seldomly here. It was the first time I've actually ever been able to get a flash of one on camera for you. I think I made the wrong move there. Apologies. But that is the reality of a live safari. There's no going back. To replay things, this is the creature that got us all so excited. They are incredibly tough, resilient, and wonderful animals that can stand up to even lion and leopard, even though they are much, much smaller, almost a tenth of a lion's size, yet they can put up incredibly long fights and sometimes even survive attacks from lion. As the name suggests, the honey badger, they do really enjoy raiding beehives and can even tolerate many, many stings from bees. And I've also seen a documentary where one was bitten by a highly venomous snake called a puff adder. It managed to kill the snake, and what it did was it just rolled up into a ball after it had killed the snake. It lay next to the dead snake, rolled up into a ball, had a sleep for about an hour and a half or two, woke up, shook its head, and then fed on the snake as if nothing had ever happened. Okay, well, that's that. We are going to be... Oh, wonderful. The girls in FC have already got a slow motion clip prepared, so hopefully you'll be able to get a slightly better view of it. Well done to Brian, who not only spotted it but managed to keep the camera on it while I was trying to loop ahead. So, enjoy the clip and we will see you afterwards. Well, I hope you got a slightly better view of it there. And again, thanks Kirsty and Nikki and everyone in the final control room for making that happen so quickly. Great idea. We are now going to try and get out of this little off-road section that we've got ourselves into. So we're going to send you back to James, who's found you another animal with its name beginning in a H.
What a real joy to see a honey badger. I'm really jealous. They are the most fantastic little animals. So I'm so glad you got to see that. And indeed, an action replay, slow motion, fantastic stuff, all the way out here in the bushveld to be able to send you something like that. Those are not honey badgers, of course. In fact, I thought initially that they were vultures sitting above a carcass, but they are not. They are a flock of 10 hardy-dar ibis. And the reason I've stopped here is not because the hardy-dar ibis is an unusual bird, but because there are so many of them. I've not seen a flock that size. And the bird is so unremarkable that Kirsten sort of suggested I press on and try and find a lion. But I think it's astonishing that there are so many of them in this tree. And they do, as David said, look pretty ominous against that black sky behind them, well, grey sky behind them. It's a really rather special picture. Now, the hardy-dar ibis, of course, is not a meat-eater bird. Well, it is a bit. If you happen to be a worm and you consider yourself meat, then it would be a meat-eating bird. But that beak that you can see, that long, fairly terrifying-looking beak, is not very terrifying unless you try and catch the bird. It is used to probe the ground. And what I was reading about the other day was that the bill is actually very sensitive, although it looks like a hard sort of chisel without feeling, like a nail or a horn. It actually is very sensitive and has some very sensitive nerve endings in it, which means that that bird can stick its beak into the ground and feel if there is a worm there and then pull it out. Now, I think that's quite astonishing. You might be able to do that with your fingers, but that bird can do it with a keratinous, look at that, look at them flying, keratinous sheath over its beak. It can feel a worm moving under the ground. Let's just sneak a little bit forward and see if we can't see them probing in the floor. They will love this soil, of course, now with a little bit of moisture in it. It means they won't be bashing their heads against a concrete-like ground, which of course is a good thing if you don't want concussion. So there they are. Now let's just watch them feed. The other advantage to doing this, of course, is that we can hear if any lions might call. There comes flying in. Now, I know it's difficult on the screen sometimes to tell the size of an animal like this, but these birds are about, I mean, from beak to tail tip, probably about a foot long. See, sticking their beaks into the ground. And as I've said before, they have the most kind of incongruous and attention-arresting call. It's really very unpleasant in the early morning after a large Friday night out, which is what happens in Johannesburg. They proliferate in Johannesburg because they eat a lot of the king crickets, or otherwise known as Parktown prawns, which are these great big terrifying red-looking crickets that seem to proliferate after thunderstorms in Johannesburg, and these very kind birds clean them up for us. I think that's a really pretty sighting. Kirsten is coming round to it, she says. She says it's starting to look like quite a nice sighting to her. That's good. Well done, Kirsten. And for those of you who don't know, Johannesburg, of course, economic hub of, well, used to be Africa before Nigeria took over as the largest economy on the continent. And many people come to South Africa and they sort of fly straight through Johannesburg to Cape Town, which is, of course, a very beautiful place. But Johannesburg does have its own attractions. Cape Townians, of course, will tell you that Johannesburg is a terrible place. This is because they don't understand that the amount of work they do in Cape Town is equivalent to a very small village in any other parts of the world. And so we need Johannesburg to keep the country going. Bonita, you're in Atlanta, Georgia, and you want to know about the insects that we get here and how large they are. Well, Bonita, some of them the size of your head. You can't believe the size of some of the insects that come through here. Terrifying creatures, look like great big aliens. Now, Bonita, I think you'll find that the suite of insects that we get here is very, very similar to the size of the insect you get at home there. There's nothing particularly terrifying. I suppose the largest or longest insects we'd get would be some very big stick insects, which of course are totally harmless. They look like sticks, and you could get them up to a foot long in this area, I suppose, but that's very unusual. And then the heaviest insect, I guess, would probably be a dung beetle. You know, some of the dung beetles are pretty big, but they're also completely harmless and actually really entertaining to watch. You can pick them up and turn them over and look at them and study them, and they're really fascinating. And so I don't think there's anything particularly terrifying there. We don't get a great proliferation of huge wasps and things like that. They are around, but not very big. So if you're a little bit worried about insects, please don't be worried. I mean, yes, they can be a little bit awkward when you're driving along and there are just so many of them, but they're almost universally completely harmless. All right, I think we'll leave these hardy-dars to themselves. Oh, no, hang on. Apparently the hardy-dar's got something in its mouth. Let me get out my powerful binoculars. David, what is it caught? While we try and find out what that hardy-dar's caught, I'm just going to hail Scott on the radio, who wishes to speak with me. Go ahead, Scott.
James, update from last night. Apparently the Ikuhumas were on Sibambili Arathusa cut line. I'm not sure if you want to head across there sooner rather than later.
Did you hear? Oh, he's got a snake. Look at that, he's got a snake. It's unbelievable. That looks like one of those blind snakes. Maybe a Schlegel's blind snake. But you can see the bird he's very pleased with his catch, and I don't think the snake's dead yet. It will be soon. But what he's doing, the reason he doesn't just swallow it, well, A, he needs to kill it first. But secondly, of course, remember a bird has no teeth. And that is a pretty bony little reptile that he's caught there. And so he'll want to almost kind of bash it and crush it with the beak so that the bones are all broken up by the time it eventually goes down into his gullet. That is amazing. This is fantastic. I've never seen that. That wasn't probed off the ground, that was simply stolen. Although, if it's one of the burrowing snakes, it's quite possible it was pulled out of the ground. Isn't that wonderful? So while we watch that, you may have heard from Scott, who said that the lions were yesterday on Simbambili. And so what I think we'll do is go to the edge of the road here, to the corner, turn around and go back towards Arathusa, and get an update from them. Simbambili, just to give you an idea, if you are a new viewer, we are on Djuma. To the west of us is a reserve called Arathusa, where we can drive, and just north of Arathusa is Simbambili. So if those lions came south into Arathusa, then we will probably be able to see them, or certainly have an idea where they are. I just think it's so interesting that he won't swallow it straight away. Well, also that somebody's trying to steal it from him. So obviously he has to be very careful about what he swallows. And I don't think it's got anything to do with sort of any kind of envenomation that could occur. I think it's probably a fairly harmless snake. Looks like a blind snake to me. You do get some burrowing asps that are venomous, and they resemble the blind snakes, and you don't want to be fiddling with them. But I don't think that's what that is. Fascinating, fascinating stuff. Good. Oh, hang on. Scott is actually closer than us to those lions, so I'm going to suggest that he goes there. Scott, do you copy, Scott?
Go ahead.
Scott, if you're on Triple M, please feel free, go for it. Go and see what you can find.
I'm not, I'm heading back west, not from a waterfall with the cut line. I'm just making my way there.
Copy, I'm Gari Main Junction Cheetah Cut Line, so I think you're definitely closer.
Okay, copy.
So I think Scott will probably head that way because he's a bit closer.
If I don't come back, then we'll reconvene at that stage.
Isn't that amazing? I wish I could identify the snake exactly. There it goes. No, still not. Gone. Look how big that's a big hardy-dar. Patty in New York, you'd like me to do the ibis call again. Patty, all right, I'll do it once. Brian's very good at the ibis call. It goes... Okay, let's carry on. That was a magnificent hardy-dar sighting, top hardy-dar sighting I've ever had in my life. You might get them to call. Come on, call. Now, Canton, Tampa, you've mentioned a crane species that you get at home there, and you want to know if we get crane species here in South Africa. We do. Our national bird is, in fact, a crane, the blue crane, endangered species. But we don't find cranes in this area, no. Blue cranes tend to be more on the high veld and wetter areas, and I think you'll find that most crane species prefer areas that are a bit wetter than this. They tend to be foragers in fields and open grasslands, where often there's a lot of inundated water, so I think that's why we don't get any cranes in this particular area. We are now on the far eastern boundary, southeastern boundary. There are a lot of waterbuck around the place. We'll just look at these ones here. And as many of you will know, waterbuck have a delightful scent about them. It's like a sort of spicy horse, if you like. I'm sure you all know what a horse smells like. And these ones are like spicy horses, lurking behind that bush there. There's a cow. And one of the most interesting things I think about them is the fact that they look like they've got teddy bear-like hair, which they do, of course, but it's actually quite sparsely spaced. So although it's quite long and they look furry, which is of course a ridiculous thing to be out here when the temperature reaches 40 degrees Celsius on a regular basis, the hair is actually quite sparsely distributed on the skin, so it doesn't make them too hot. It looks like a fairly sleepy female waterbuck. It's still very much an autumnal colour to the leaves. And I don't think the trees are going to be flushing again while the grasses will. I think the growth season for the trees is probably over, although we had a very nice question yesterday about whether or not some of the trees might fruit. The trees like the marulas, maybe, you know, they had a very poor season, and whether they might re-fruit again. And the answer, I think, is probably no. I don't know that for sure, but I'd say no. Now, Marie, you're on Twitter and you want to know how good the animal sightings are in late May and June. Marie, it's not a simple question to answer, and that's because it depends on where you are, obviously, and it also depends on, you know, what the distribution of animals happens to be at the time. So, for example, you could be driving along, Marie, in May and June on an area like this, which is 1,500 hectares or 4,500 acres, and you could see nothing. It would be very unlikely, but you could see nothing, just given the fact that some of the animals might be away. The lion prize might not be here, there might not be a leopard on the reserve at the time, but May and June, I think, is a brilliant time to be out here because the chances of you seeing things are very high. I think that the vegetation will be much thinner than it is now. The temperature will be almost perfect in May. It doesn't get too hot, not too cold yet in the evenings, so May and June a very good time to come. Just checking the ground for tracks, plenty of hyena activity during the night, going up and down here on our eastern boundary, so-called the cheetah cut line. I think there was a cheetah seen here in 1902. I'm being facetious, I have actually seen a cheetah on the cheetah cut line, believe it or not. Jen B, you say, you know we have giant cockroaches in this area. Jen B, and we don't show them on camera. Brian, have you ever seen a giant cockroach?
Not yet.
I've not seen a giant cockroach. I'm not sure that there is such a thing. The largest cockroach I've ever seen is about that big. It's about 2 inches across. That would be the very, very largest cockroach I've ever seen, and I think maybe I've seen 2 of them. So we don't get very huge cockroaches here at all, GNB, and that's why we wouldn't show them to you. If we did find a giant cockroach, we'd absolutely try and film it because it would be very interesting. But there aren't huge cockroaches here. The closest relative to the cockroaches that we do show you, of course, are the termites, believe it or not. I have found the odd cockroach back at camp. Not so many in the bush, though. There's not much action going on here on the cheetah cut line at the moment, but we just want to check there aren't any leopard tracks coming to or from. Interesting question here from Lynn. We were watching that hardy-dar eating the snake there and sort of deciding whether it was perhaps a venomous snake or one of the burrowing asps as opposed to one of the blind snakes. And Lynn, you want to know, do birds know when a snake is venomous? I would say to within reason they probably do. I'm not sure how they would know. Maybe there's a learned behavior. And certainly, I mean, there are lots of birds that specialize in snake killing. The secretary bird being one, the number of snake eagles out here being some of the others. And they will regularly take a venomous snake. I think what you'll find, though, Lynn, is there are 2 aspects to this. Firstly, when a bird, a large raptor, kills a snake, remember, it doesn't always swallow it whole. It often will just eat the meat and kind of leave the head. And then if they do swallow it whole, remember that the venom is only effective. You can eat snake venom. If you don't have a cut or lesion in your esophagus or down into your stomach, your stomach acids will break up the proteins that make up that venom very quickly. It's the venom actually got to get into your blood or lymphatic system before it can have an effect. So to swallow a snake's head, for example, in a venomous snake can be completely harmless, especially if you have a very strong stomach digestion. So I would say my answer, Lynn, in a very roundabout way, which is normally a way of saying I don't actually know, but I'm guessing, and that's what's happening here, is I would say no, they don't know the difference to within reason. That's called hedging your bets. All right, let's head across to Scott. He's got some updates on those lions, and I'll keep driving up here and keep you posted as to what we find here.
So we have now turned around, as I'm sure James told you. The Inkahuma Pride somehow managed to make it across to Arathusa. They were east of our eastern boundary one day, the next day they were west of Djuma's western boundary. So how they managed to get this far, I guess, is probably solely down to the fact that the rain completely washed away whatever tracks they left behind them, therefore giving us no idea as to where they could be. So basically they were seen sometime last night off to our right on the Sibambili Arathusa cut line. So we're just going to check this road to see if they haven't come back onto Djuma. Failing that, we may decide, either James or myself, to go into Arathusa. Only one of us is allowed across there at any given time, which is just the traversing agreement that is in place. And for those of you who are new to the safari experience, basically it's a free-for-all for the animals. They can go wherever they like, but for good reason the humans are contained, or not contained, assigned certain areas that they can drive in, and that's simply to make sure that any one area does not become over-congested, which is hugely important to not overcrowd people's safari experiences. Less is more when it comes to other vehicles when on safari. So that's just that. I haven't heard any updates on the Arathusa Game Drive channel yet. As you can hear, it's not very clear. So I'm just waiting to get a little bit closer to the action, closer to the guys there, and that way we should be able to hear them a little bit more clearly on the radio. This road here is the Sibambili Arathusa cut line. So the lions are lying somewhere down on this road. Where they've gone from here, I'm not sure. We either wanted them to go south onto Arathusa. If they'd have gone north back up to the right of that road, that would mean they're on Sibambili, where we cannot go. But certainly good prospects, and at least somebody worked out where they were yesterday, because now we can fine-tune our search for them. Hello to Love3 Dogs, and you're querying or just further investigating my comment that just about all wild animals will be fed on to varying degrees by the various tribes and local people that live in Africa, and you inquiring to whether endangered species are permitted to be fed on. No, they are not, but the biggest problem with conserving African wilderness areas is that they are often very large and expansive, and the larger any wilderness area is, obviously more difficult it becomes to police. So you find a lot of tribes and people living as they did many, many years ago that may not necessarily be getting the updates on the latest laws and the latest population updates regarding the various animals. So you can't really blame them. They're almost none the wiser, and all they're trying to do is exist as they did many years ago. So yes, of course, the more educated local people in more built-up African countries, like South Africa is a good example. We are far more developed than a lot more of the African countries that surround us, and therefore have got better systems in place. Maybe the word gets spread a little bit better. So that's something important to remember. But again, there are lots of hungry, desperate people in this country that either don't get the updates as to what the rules are because they live in simply too remote a location, or even if they did know the rules, they are not in a position where they can actually afford to survive without doing whatever it takes to get whatever food they can. Generally though, I think the good news is that, you know, the endangered species, you know, ones that come to mind for me, cheetah, wild dog, you know, the better known endangered species aren't going to be prey that are typically sought out after. And what I meant by the fact that just about anything would be fed on is that there are certain people that may have the use for an abnormal animal to eat, like a leopard or a vulture. You know, it's not that they are a household delicacy, but more special medicines that are concocted using various parts of those specific animals. So I hope that helps to answer your question a little bit.
Morning, copy. Go on with.
Valerie, you would like to know what Sibambili means. I don't know. James is going to be the right person to ask for that. He is our local Shangaan or Chitsonga expert. Sibambili. To bamba is to catch, but Sibambili, we have captured. This posse is plural. Gi, NGI is singular. Si would mean plural, meaning we. And then to bamba is to catch. To bambile means have caught, but that's with an E on the end, not an I on the end. This is Sibambili, not Sibambile. So I don't know, let's ask James, but the spelling is Sibambili. What I'll do once the radio comes a little bit clearer, I'll ask one of the Sibambili guides, Doug or Tristan. Failing that, I will ask one of the local Shangaan guides that are driving around. I think I did hear Roy on the radio. So that is something we'll be able to try and work out. But for now, Angstuf, which in Shangaan means I don't know. Hello, Chris in Arizona. You are interested, out of all the wild animals that you can feed on, all the venison, which is the tastiest? And I guess, like most things, Chris, it'll depend on who you ask. For me, they're all varying degrees of tasty, but like most wild animals, they require very careful preparation and also cooking. It's not as easy to cook a venison fillet as it is to cook a beef fillet, which is generally a lot more fatty, which makes it softer and generally tastier to eat. Wild game is often very lean and requires to be matured and marinated and also cooked very well. So for me, it all depends on the chef and the preparation. You cannot feed on an animal that has been recently killed, like lions do. Often you'll hear of our beef being well matured, aged steaks, and that helps to break down the meat and make it more tasty. And it's the same for venison. If it's been cured properly, that is also an important part of the process. But all of the wild game that I have fed on has been tasty, as long as it's been prepared well. In South Africa, we've got a big culture of feeding on the dried meat of animals, as the American audience would know it as jerky, is what we call it biltong, B-I-L-T-O-N-G. And again, a lot of venison as well as beef will be cured in that way, basically just dried with salt and spices and vinegar. A tasty delicacy that we enjoy snacking on just about any time, but especially if you've got friends around or you're watching sport. Okay, still no updates. I'm going to see if I can't get an update from the guys here now. Morning guys, Scott here. Just confirming the Nkuhumas were seen on Sibambili Arathusa cutline yesterday.
Scotty, morning, Sputz. We have them at Sibambili Dam.
Oh, well done, Doug. Thank you for putting us out of our misery. Could you also confirm what exactly Sibambili means, please?
Sibambili is a made-up word made up by a couple of directors in Johannesburg. It's a mix of two different languages, and I think it's Swahili for lion, and Mbili, which is the Tonga or Bantu for two.
Okay, copy that. Makes sense. Thank you very much. Okay, so it all makes perfect sense once you understand that. The people involved in making up this name combined a Kiswahili word, Simba for lion, and Mbili meaning two, the place of two lions. Today they've got 5 lions. It would be Simbatano. No, Tano is 5 in Swahili. I don't know what it is in Zulu. It could also be something similar. Swahili and is a Bantu language, as are a lot of the Southern African languages like Xitsonga, like isiZulu. So some words are exactly the same here. Mbili in Zulu and Shangaan and Swahili are all the same. It means two. In Nyama is also the same throughout, but other words can be drastically different, and as a whole, the languages, even though they're all Bantu, are very different. So there we go, the place of two lion, yet today there are 5 there, the Nkuhuma lioness. They're a little bit far from our eastern boundary. Well done to Rich Smith, who cracked the code and worked out that Sibambili does mean two lion. Those guys will be really happy. Shame a lot of the guides to the west of us have been really battling for lion over the last couple of weeks. So I'm happy that the Nkuhuma lioness have headed across there to give some of the other guides some breathing space with their guests. We'll have our turn again. That is hilarious. Hello Marjorie in Texas. You would like to know if I've fed on any of the large birds of this area. The game birds of South Africa, or birds that you are typically going to be feeding on, if you would like to, are the chicken-like animals like the francolin and the guinea fowl, of which I've fed on both. Again, if prepared correctly, very tasty. Interestingly enough, and this is going to take a lot of you by surprise, a guinea fowl has got red meat. It's not a white meat like a chicken. Isn't that a surprising fact? But yes, guinea fowl and francolin are the main birds that I've fed on. Others, I can't think of any others, but typically it's not frowned upon to feed on the other birds, but it's generally not done. Anything smaller and or bigger and different, like the storks, those animals are not fed on because I guess their populations, together with their taste, don't make sense for us to feed on them. So basically the chicken-looking birds, the francolin and the guinea fowl, are the two that I have fed on. Oh, ostrich, of course. Ostrich is a commercially farmed bird that is fed on. Very popular. You can buy it in just about every single supermarket that you go into these days. Again, it's like most wild animals, it's lean and healthy for you. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess like most things in life, you have to understand where the supply is coming from. There's a movement of people that suggest by eating wild animals you're having a less of a negative impact on the environment and on the planet, because you'll find that domestic animals and or generally commercially farmed animals will be fed foods. It's not sustainable. It will require wild bush like this to be torn up and fresh pastures planted that need to be irrigated in order to feed them, having a much bigger footprint per kilogram of meat than it would be to feed on wild animals. And I agree with that. Then you get the ostrich, which is a wild animal, not necessarily living in the wild, being farmed commercially, could be getting fed, unorganic food, so therefore not as healthy as it would be if they were feeding organically on wild vegetation. So you get these kind of interesting grey areas, I guess, on that topic. Okay, we've just got a radio call through from Louise at the Djuma research camp, and there are some monkeys alarm calling there, so hold on tight. We're a couple of minutes away and we need to get there quickly. If we can find out what these monkeys are shouting at, we may have our morning sorted. Could well be a leopard there, maybe Karula, the queen of Djuma, but we need to be able to see where they are looking in order to be able to try and have a chance of finding whatever predator is there. Yee-hee. Hold on, everybody. I know we've lost Brian. Only kidding. All right. Louise, are you still on this channel? Can't get a hold of Louise, it appears, but let's just try and get there as soon as we can and try and work out for ourselves where exactly these monkeys are. You'll probably find that Louise can just hear them. She can't necessarily see them, which is fine. Like a little Ferrari safari to get the blood pumping early in the morning. Bug nearly whacked me in the eye there. It hit very close, so I got lucky. I was also fortunate that it wasn't the biggest of bugs. The last thing you want when you're speeding along like this is to have a dung beetle or something wallop you in the eye. Wham, wham, wham. These are not speed bumps that we're going over, even though that's what they may appear to be at this stage. They are to prevent water runoff building up, and it just directs it off the roads. news, James is also rushing into the area. Now I'm guessing it's the monkeys that live in and around the Vuyatela camp. Just going to stop here for a quick listen. Oh, I think I can maybe see a monkey in that tree there at about 10 o'clock. Something big and dark. No, that's a go-away bird. Those are the go-away birds we can hear calling now. Quack. Let's continue. I can't hear any monkeys from here. So let's try and get a little bit closer to the DRC. I'm going to go back onto our game drive channel for this area. Where should we go? Should we go there? No, let's get here. Once we've worked out where the monkeys are alarm calling, I'll maybe be able to give James a better idea of where to head, and we can combine our efforts in the search. The tricky thing with the monkey alarm calling is that it could be watching something 500 meters away, or even as far as a kilometer away. Here's the little turn off to the Djuma research camp, so let's go down here. Let's see if we can't hear any monkeys. I would suggest keeping an eye out at the Djuma waterhole camera. Lucy, you already keeping an eye out on the Djuma waterhole camera, so thank you for that. And you said there's nothing there just yet. Okay. It's tricky business trying to search for animals around a lodge. Obviously there's a lot of infrastructure that prevents us from driving exactly where we want to, and there's not also roads, so we're going to have to do a big loop around. I'm going to get a hold of James quickly. It's James for Scott. James, no further alarm calls that I can hear. Wentz and parked outside the DRC. I'm going to take the Gallagher Waterhole road down to the dam. Copy. Station, just a report of some monkeys alarm calling around Vuyatela. James and I are going to follow up on. Also, the Nkuhumas are Sibambili Dam. Okay, so just updating everyone there, making some plans. Now that James knows which direction we are going to be checking in, he's going to come across from the other side. And you can race around as much as you like. Oh, there goes the Woodlands Kingfisher. I was hoping to show you. It's a tricky situation, this. Do we rush around and cover as much ground as possible, or do we rather drive somewhere in the general area that we know we could at least hear some more alarm calls and wait? Because you can hear a lot further than you can see. That is why it is often best to stop and listen. Obviously, you've got to be confident in terms of the location of where you've stopped. You don't want to be too far away from the action, but we know if we stop at the Gallagher Waterhole, which is what I'm thinking we're going to do, we are in close proximity to where Louise heard those monkeys alarm calling from. You can hear them calling from about easily 500 meters away. Let's maybe wait there and see what's happening. Thankfully, James is already at the Djuma Waterhole, which is also a good place to be right now. So why don't you jump on his vehicle and try and find whatever it is these monkeys are shouting at.
Excellent.
We're just at the dam, as Scott said, everybody. Sorry about that noise on the radio there. the monkeys, of course, were calling behind the camp over there, and which you can there just see, and quite often, if this is a karula or another leopard that lives around here, i.e. Tingana or Mvula, they would come through this kind of bushy area along the drainage line, perhaps pop up to have a drink here, or just melt away into that riverine bush on the western side of the camp, eastern side of the camp. I don't see anything here. I'm looking with my very powerful binoculars. Last used, of course, by Wellington at the Battle of Waterloo. I think what we're going to do is turn around and just drive sort of towards where Scott is. The camp is in the way, of course. I can hear some alarm calling grey go-away birds, but sometimes they just shout at each other. We must just watch carefully here. And as we know, the lions are at Sibambili, so quite likely that this is a leopard unless it's a male lion, which would be quite interesting. Well, it would be fascinating, not quite interesting. So let's just pop up this way. Now, unfortunately, of course, the area to the north of the Gallagher waterhole where Scott is heading now is, well, I mean, it's undrivable. So if we do find something in there, it's probably going to be a very short sighting. But with any luck, we will find a leopard sitting upon some hapless piece of prey, which he will then devour in front of our eyes. Hold on, David. Now, we did come from Buffelshoek Dam when we got reports of these monkeys yelling. I'm just going to turn the radio back up so I can hear what's going on in case Scott tries to hail me. And we drove here at a great speed with great enthusiasm to see if we couldn't find what was causing the consternation in the monkeys, but we haven't seen anything yet. And I certainly haven't found, there was nothing at Buffelshoek Dam, everyone. It was quite full of water though, which is quite nice. So during the hot times next week, now apparently Scott is at the Gallagher pan. He can see a monkey in the camp, but it's looking very relaxed with life. It's about to tuck into some bacon and eggs. So not obviously very terrified at the moment, which means that whatever was causing the trouble has flown off. What I did see as we drove in here was an eagle flying over. They're not very, I mean, the monkeys here don't normally alarm call at eagles because there aren't any monkey-eating species of eagle normally. But maybe it was that. It may have been a python. They don't like pythons at all, monkeys, because pythons like monkeys. So we'll just drive very slowly up here. Looking, this is the bush that I was pointing out to you on the left-hand side here. It provides ideal cover for a predator. Let's stop here and just have a listen. Question from Kath, I think. Kath Tamira, or Kath in Tamira. You want to know about Kath and Tamira. You want to know how fast these vehicles can go while we listen to see if we can hear some alarm calls. You can hear a woodpecker smashing his head against a tree. Cat, not very fast anymore. It used to be quite a fast car. I mean, the engine in it was the same as the old 328, the BMW 328. But these days, you know, age and wear and tear has taken their toll, and it's geared not to go very fast. But they're perfectly fast enough for this area.
I haven't seen Karula up that far.
So I've got no more alarm calls, or we've got no more alarm calls. Everything seems to be very relaxed. Let's do one more little trip up here. And then if we come up with nothing here, we'll go back around over the dam towards Quarantine and see if perhaps whatever it was hasn't gone back that way. And if it is, for example, Karula, she does often, she kind of goes through that area, that thick block where the monkeys were calling, and she can then head north and then across to the east, or she will often then go onto Quarantine clearings. See nothing here. No birds shouting, no squirrels shouting, no monkeys shouting. All is peace. Okay, Scott is going to pop out of that road over there, so I'm going to turn around right here. He will check that road there. Anything pops out. Okay. No tracks, like I say, leading into Bivelshoek Dam, nothing at Bivelshoek Dam itself. So all was quiet on the eastern front this morning. It's not to say that there won't be something around there. Ava, while we're driving along, I believe you've been having a bit of a discussion with Scott about what animals people eat, and then of course the names of the lodges and what they mean. And Ava, you want to know about the local people here and how many are there? Well, Ava, there are probably at least 6 million people, believe it or not, living on the borders of the Greater Kruger National Park. Now that's a substantial number of human beings, and most of them, well, kind of, you can divide it up. In the south, there would be Swazi-speaking people. In the middle and northern regions, there would be Shangaan or Tsonga-speaking people, and that's most of the people out here. In the far north, there would be Venda-speaking, Shivenda, which is an almost impossible language to learn. And it's quite interesting, it's totally unrelated to many of the all the South African languages. And then there's also a pocket of Pedi or Northern Sotho speakers, and of course that's where Arathusa gets its name from. That's a Pedi name. It's the only Pedi name lodge around here. So those are the people, about 6 million people on the borders of the Kruger Park, as far as I know. And they all live in little rural villages, some of them very attractive, some of them fairly poverty-stricken and dust-riddled. And Kate, you're in San Francisco and you're asking about how the Shangaan people or the local people are coping with the drought. And the answer, Kate, is with great difficulty. The closer to the park they are, the less rain there's been. Some of the communities live quite close to the mountains. They've had okay rain this year, but those living around where we are have had a really tough time. Now, a lot of the water comes from wells, which means water is going to be much more irregular than it is normally. No one's got piped water to their homes, so that's a problem for them. Their cattle, in which most of their, or a lot of their wealth is invested, are really struggling. The grazing is not good out there at the moment, and so the cattle are really struggling. So that's a real difficulty for local people here. And remember, I mean, there's an unemployment rate in many of the areas of up to 70%. That is a quite astonishing statistic. And everyone with a salary is supporting between 6 and 10 people. Okay, Scotty is going around the way to get tele-access, so that's perfect. He's basically doing a pincer movement around this area, and if there was a predator, and if she or he wishes to show her or himself, we will be in a position to see her or him. Right, so there's the dam, or not the dam, the pan. And we'll just drive gently up onto Quarantine clearing. Now, Eric, you want to know if Tsonga is the same as Shangaan. Not really. Xitsonga, I suppose, would be the overarching language, and it's spoken all the way into Mozambique, but not all Tsongas would consider themselves Shangans. The Shangans were an offshoot of the Tsongas, and it was an amalgamation of a fairly large clan of Zulus and the Tsonga-speaking people. And what I find so fascinating about that story is that there was a chap called Manukosi, who was an Ndwandwe chieftain, which was a Zulu chieftain, it was a Zulu clan, who took offense to Shaka in the 1820s. Shaka, of course, was the great Zulu king or military leader. Some might say vicious dictator and murderer. We'll leave that for another day. And Manukosi came up the eastern coast of South Africa, went into Mozambique, and he was largely a group of male warriors, obviously, and not many retainers. They were kind of running from Shaka, and they then assimilated a whole lot of Tsonga-speaking groups where it wasn't a very centralized authority that they had. And what is interesting to me is that instead of those Tsonga-speaking peoples absorbing the Zulu language of their conquerors, if you like, the conquerors absorbed the conquered language of Xitsonga. And apparently what happens in a situation like this is that because most of the offspring of the conquered spend time around the women are, of course, Tsonga speakers. And so what happens is that the male, when you have these situations where great groups of male warriors or armies come into an area and take over, what you happen is that seems to happen is that they lose their language. And that's why the Tsongas, or the Shangans, who were the offshoot of that initial conquering, there is a little speaks-hinged tortoise on the road. So that is why those originally conquered peoples still speak Shangaan. And Manukosi took on the name Soshangane, which I'm not sure why he took it on. I think it was from a river somewhere around where they were. And that is how the Shangans got their name. So basically, in a long-winded and roundabout way, the Shangans are a group of Tsonga-speaking peoples. Phew, what a long explanation. There you go, Eric. Sorry about that. That is a speaks-hinged tortoise. He's an indecisive speaks-hinged tortoise. Oh, this is just massive interaction going on here. David, pan to the left quickly. We seem to have... No, that's far enough. Whoa, there we go. Look at that. Oh, they've missed each other. Now, the speaks-hinged tortoise is known to eat the pill millipede. That is not a pill millipede, that's a worm-like millipede. You can see he's not vaguely interested in it. Phew, David, that was, amazing action there. Two of the speed demons of the Lowveld there in a headlong collision. Phew, could have been ugly. You managing to keep up with that one, Dave? It's a speedy animal. Okay, let's leave him alone. We're on quarantine clearings. Ava, there seem to be lots of concern today about enormous insects. You want to know about whether there are giant millipedes here. No giant millipedes. That's about as big as they get, actually. And that one was about that size, so about 4 inches long. You will get them up to 6 inches, but no, that's about as large as they get. I imagine that in some of the forested areas of Africa, perhaps in Gabon, you may well find much larger examples of millipedes, and in fact that's where you will find the biggest insect, would be in rainforests. And of course a millipede is an eater of dead and dying plant matter, so in a big forest you'll find there'll be lots for a millipede to eat, and therefore they'll get much bigger. I'm just looking at the ground here to see what grasses have managed to flush out of quarantine clearings, and I see not much yet. A lot of the forbs or the pioneer plants have come up again, have flushed again. There are some grass plants though, and I think with a bit of heat and sun come next week, we'll find that the grass sward on quarantine might be replaced somewhat. Remember that there's a seed bed always. The soil here will contain masses and masses of seeds, and so even though the plants themselves might be pulled out and eaten by desperate grazers, once the rains come back and there's sufficient sun, those seeds will germinate and replace what has been taken out. David, can you feel the precipitation? It's a very fresh precipitation coming out of the sky. Right, we have not seen, of course, anything that has caused the consternation of the monkeys. We're going to go round and just do another loop where Scott was. Right, let's head back to Scott. He's just over there. I'm going to go back around towards the Gallagher waterhole, and we'll keep you posted.
Well, happy to hear that James is going to head back to the waterhole. We're kind of moving into the area that he's in now. Just checking now for any sign of tracks. Hoping that that may be able to lead us closer to where, whatever this threat that the monkey saw is. We did see a monkey. It looked like a female holding a little baby. It was far away from us, but she was looking to the northwestern side of the camp. But we only saw her looking in that direction for a very short space of time before she came down from the tree. Didn't hear one alarm call. So now I'm just checking close to the camp. You can see the perimeter fence that surrounds the Gallagher camp. Karula will often skirt around this perimeter fence through these areas. We've had her moving here in the flesh. I've also seen her tracks moving in this area quite a few times. So we obviously didn't race here fast enough. The monkeys had already stopped alarm calling, which makes things difficult. It's tough enough even if you come across an animal while it still is alarm calling, for the mere fact that you do not know where these animals may be. The monkey may be sitting in a tree very close to where you may be or where you may see the monkey, but it can see far away. I mean, if we were a monkey here, parked at the top of a tree, you can see far, 500-600 meters. And if they're alarm calling at a leopard all the way across that valley, which they can see, and you race to the tree that the monkeys are sitting in, even though you may see which direction they're looking in, it still doesn't make life easier. That, coupled with the fact that any predator who does start being alarmed at will typically try and slink away to prevent any further attention being attracted to it. So this may be an unsolved mystery, or James may get lucky as he heads back into the area where I think he could get lucky. Hello, B. Short. You have apparently seen a herd of animals making their way towards the waterhole, and we've just seen them now. It's a bachelor herd of Inyala. Hello, everyone on the Djuma waterhole camera, which we've just passed. And here are the boys that B. Short spotted. All different shapes and sizes. The one in front looks to be the biggest and the oldest, and then it's almost in perfect size and age, working their way from biggest to smallest, from right to left. Brian and I also did keep still for about 5 to 10 minutes, hoping that by being stationary we would be rewarded by some further alarm calls, maybe from a different species, maybe not monkey, maybe francolins, squirrels, antelope like these, and Nyala, which have a dog-like bark. Pah, pah. Oh, is it playtime? Looks like you want to get some mud on your horns and then possibly have a little wrestling match with your counterpart there. Come on. why don't you show us exactly how Inyala trained to be big and nasty one day? Not big and nasty, but it is important that they understand how to fight with one another. It is also interesting how Inyala and other antelope will rub their horns in the ground. It will be to try and alleviate parasites that could be trying to bore into them, or purely just a display. Looks like he's going to get involved here in this bush as well. They'll take out their anger and aggression on small shrubs from time to time. No, it looked like that was a snack. Maybe if James just switches off wherever he is, Kirsty. There seems to be another alarm call kicking up. I'm not sure what it was. Brian also heard something, possibly a monkey. Hard to tell exactly what it was, but we did hear a strange noise. So I think James is a little bit closer towards where that noise came from. And that's why it'll just be useful for him to be stationary in his vehicle, which he is now. I can't hear any further noises. You can just hear the virtual starling calling nearby to us. We can actually see it. So Brian, let's have a look at that as it calls. It's wonderful to try and show you the animals that are making the noise, not just telling you about it. And it's sitting on a dead stump over to our right. There was a Djuma What's-All camera you would have got a glimpse of before Brian zoomed in. Okay, thank you. You can keep singing. Let's just stop and listen for a few moments. For now, it's just a few Birchall starlings that I can hear calling. Oh, Brian, here comes something, I think. Is it flying straight towards us or straight away from us? Oh, no. Is it coming? I think it is coming towards us along the road. No. It was flying away. Sorry, false alarm. There was an Egyptian goose. I thought it was going to be flying straight towards us here. It would have been an awesome sequence to film, but it was flying in exactly the opposite direction, making it disappear and be far from awesome. It was nothing. I think we should carry on now. No further alarms. I'm not sure what that noise was, but it was certainly worth investigating.
Are you okay anyway?
All right. I think I'm thinking of turning around and going back the direction we've come. Well, it's just a different loop around the other side of FC. Hello, Aileen and R. Beard, who are both wondering about how monkeys move about and how often they will leave tracks on the sand. They will move on the ground every single day of their life. There's not enough of a canopy interconnecting all the trees in this area, so it would be impossible for them to survive without touching the ground. So yes, we do see their tracks. They will also forage on the ground, not only up in the trees, but like I say, the way you can see how sparsely vegetated the trees are, unlike a jungle, it would be impossible for them to survive only moving from tree to tree. They would be marooned, essentially, on a small island of food. So yes, we do see their tracks from time to time. They look fairly similar to a human hand, I guess. Their feet are different to our feet. Their toes are a little bit longer. And their big toe is more of a thumb, so their feet look more like our hands do. Our hands and our feet are hugely different because we've evolved to walk on our feet, whereas they are still walking on all fours. So different foot structure, very similar hand structure to us, and their foot is more like a hand. If I see any tracks, I will be sure to show you.